It's a great day to be inside. Good morning. Welcome in. Good to have the Daniels back with us. Glad you guys are safe and sound. We're going to have a decent little crowd once everyone gets in and settled. Glad to see you. So I want to apologize as we get started here. My flash drive was left here at the building. I'll have another flash drive that isn't always super trustworthy, and I put my stuff on it and brought it, but it wasn't trustworthy, so here we are. But the good thing is I didn't have many slides for Bible class. I still have all my sermon stuff. I think Brad's got the sermon stuff too, so we're all good there. But there are two maps I was really wanting to use. I do have a map, but that's okay. Anyway, we'll move on from that. But glad that you're here. We're going to finish up in 1 Kings chapter 19. We have about 3 or 4 verses that are left there. And then we're going to get into chapter 20, which deals with the prophets of the king in the north. So just as a quick recollection, who's the king in the north right now? We've dealt with him for several class periods. Ahab. Excellent, Justin. And then we're going to go to, not this class period, not the next, but here in a couple, we're going to go to the king of the south, that is of Judah. And since we haven't talked about him yet, I'll go ahead and mention his name is Jehoshaphat, but we're not quite there to that spot. But before we get to the prophets during Ahab and Jehoshaphat's reigns, let's finish up where we are in chapter 19. Okay, so let's talk just a little bit geography as we do get started, because in verse 19 of chapter 19, that's the 1 Kings, we're told, so he, and that's Elijah, departed from there, and he found Elisha, the son of Shaphat. And we'll pick up with it in just a moment. But before we get there, so he, Elijah, departed from there. I hate to do this. It's an early rhyme, but when we say there, from where? Where has he been? Elijah. Good, Paul. He spent some time in the far south in the Judean wilderness. Remember where God has called him to be. He's doing his prophetic duties in Israel. But he runs away after the great victory and the conflict on Carmel, because now Jezebel is after his head, or at least claims to be. And he, understandably so, is afraid about that. And so he skips and he goes to another country. He goes as far south to that border, but he's not content there. He continues on to the south. And he goes to a very holy high place for God's people in the Old Testament. What's that location? Horeb or Sinai? Yeah. So why does he go all the way to Sinai? Well, it may just be it's out kind of in the middle of nowhere, and he's just trying to get away where he can find asylum, and or it could have to do with something very special that took place about 500 years prior. What occurred at Mount Sinai? The giving of the law. Anything else, Roy? Good. And God made a very special appearance in that place. That's where the covenant is originally made with Israel through Moses. And I think there could be a few things at work here. Maybe he wants to experience the appearance of God and talk to him face to face, as Moses had the privilege to do. Maybe he wants to go to this spot where the covenant was originally given, and he's thinking, hey, things are a mess in Israel right now. Maybe we can get a renewal of that covenant. Perhaps that's what he has in mind. Nevertheless, God shows up, but he doesn't do so in fire. He doesn't do it in wind. He doesn't do it in earthquake, but he appears to Elijah how? I'll give you a hint. It's small. Yeah, the small, still voice. Good. And I think he's telling him something. Yeah, there are times for powerful manifestation, as I gave up on Mount Carmel to the northwest, but there's a time just to speak the plain truths of the Lord in a calm manner. Sometimes that's the most powerful thing that you can do. And so he spent time in Sinai, and I want to mention that because that's where we're picking up. So he departed from there, from Sinai, and everything has been going on. And he found Elisha. It's not the same guy. Elijah finds Elisha. And if you ever struggle with those in chronology, I think at one point in time, as I did, I got to thinking, and the only difference in their names, as we spell them, is actually probably different, but is alphabetical. And J comes before H. So in chronology, J, Elijah, comes before the, before the S in Elisha. So God's already told them this. Hey, I have a job for you. What is it you're doing here? You've always been listening to me, and now you're 2 countries away. Get up there. I need you up in the north. And he's called him to perform 3 tasks. He says, I want you to go the way back in verse 15, the wilderness of Damascus. And when you arrive, I want you to anoint Hazael as king over Syria. That's to the north and a little bit to the east. So that's job number 1. Job number 2, 16, you shall anoint Jehu, the son of Nimshi, as king over Israel. And job number 3, Elisha, the son of Shaphat of Abel Meholah, you shall anoint as prophet in your place. And so he's going to go way up from the deep south, travel what would appear to be hundreds of miles, all the way up to the north, and he's going to anoint Hazael, the next king over Syria, and then he's going to go down and he will anoint Jehu as the next king over Israel, and then he's going to go kind of split the difference between the Sea of Galilee, or Kinnereth, and the Salt Sea / Dead Sea, and on that Jordan River Valley in Abel Meholah, he's going to find Elisha, and he will anoint him. So here he goes, and we pick up with the finding of Elisha, as God's called him to do, who was plowing with 12 yoke of oxen before him. He was with the 12th. Let's pause and think about this for a moment. So he shows up on this farm where there are 12 yoke of oxen being worked, and the guy he needs, Elisha, is with the 12th of them. So what do you think might be the significance of he gets there and there are 12 yoke of oxen? Of course, a yoke is when 2 are brought together, so 24 oxen, 12 teams of oxen, they're out there and they're plowing the fields, and this guy's with the 12th of them. Does that speak to you in any way? It tells me potentially 2 things. Now keep in mind, we don't have tractors back in our times, right? And okay, very good, Roy. Hang on to that. I want that, okay? Excellent. So he shows up in the day when there are no tractors. They're essentially, in this huge swath of land, 12 tractors taking care of fields. Okay, there you go. That alone tells you that this guy probably comes from a wealthy background. Things are going very well for him. He has a good job and everything is nicely in place, probably, it would seem, for the rest of his life, number 1. Number 2, 12 obviously is the religious number. And I don't believe this to be a coincidence. I think that there's probably some symbolism involved. This is a very religious family, and it's a very religious man. So he's wealthy, he's very blessed by God, life's going well, and then Elijah shows up on the scene. The end of verse 19, then Elijah passed by him and threw his mantle, or his coat or his cloak, on him. And we know from elsewhere this is a delightful camel's hair piece, probably never been washed before. Wouldn't you would just love to have that draped over your shoulders as you're out sweating under the sun, working as a farmer? Oh, nice garment of camel's hair. Why would you give me this? That's weird. Well, we find out the significance in the very next verse. And he, who is Elisha, being called, left the oxen and ran after Elijah. So Elijah's just walking by and takes his heavy piece of probably stinky camel's hair and tosses on his back and just keeps walking off. And Elisha's like, whoa, wait. And he drops everything he's doing and he just starts running after the prophet of God. And he said, please let me kiss my father and my mother, and then I will follow you. Okay, now we see the significance in what's taking place. He's called him to take his place, to be the next great prophet of Israel. And isn't that neat, the way this culture operates? There's not a single word that needs to be spoken. Everyone understands the relevance of Elijah's camel hair mantle. And he says, whoa, wait. Yeah, I want to do this for sure, no doubt about it. But first, I need to go and kiss my father and mother, tell them goodbye. And he said to him, go back again, for what have I done to you? So it seems like he gives him permission, but the wording's a little awkward there, isn't it? It's like, what exactly does he mean by this? I would say there are a couple of possibilities. One could he might simply be stating, well, you can do whatever you want. I haven't forced you to do anything. That might be what he has in mind. But I'd also like to read to you from a couple of kind of paraphrased Bible versions that might get the sentiment here also. This is the Contemporary English Version, and it reads, "You can go," Elijah said, "but remember what I've done for you." Okay, and then I'll also read from the Message. "Go ahead," said Elijah, "but mind you, don't forget what I've just done to you." And those are consistent in their renderings. That could be the thought here. He might be saying, that's fine, but just don't forget your task at hand or don't have a change of heart. Might be what he's saying to him. I could see that either way. What I'd like to do is pause right here. Turn to the New Testament. We have a similar occurrence with a tremendous prophet calling others. And I want you to notice their responses and kind of some similarities here. And let's compare and contrast then. Luke 9, verse 57. As they were going along the road, someone said to Jesus, "I will follow you wherever you go." And Jesus said to him, "Foxes have holes and birds of the air have nests, but the Son of Man has nowhere to lay his head." To another he said, "Follow me." But he said, Lord, let me first go and bury my father." Then Jesus said to him, "Leave the dead to bury their own dead. But as for you, go and proclaim the kingdom of God." Yet another said, "I will follow you, Lord, but let me first say farewell to those at my home." Sound familiar? Jesus said to him, "No one who puts his hand to the plow," the very thing that Elisha's doing right now, "and looks back is fit for the kingdom of God." There's a rebuke of that man who does the very thing that Elisha does. So you tell me, why is it okay for Elisha to do what he does and not okay for the guy who Jesus calls to follow him? You don't have to answer that right now, but let's think about that for a few minutes as we do move on. Verse 21, "So Elisha turned back from him and took a yoke of oxen and slaughtered them and boiled their flesh using the oxen's equipment and gave it to the people, and they ate. Then he arose and followed Elijah and became his servant." Okay, so I also ask you to pause right here and turn to Mark chapter 10. Mark 10. Again, a similar instance and calling of a prophet for someone else to become a follower and to do the work of a minister. Mark 10, verse 17. "And as he was setting out on his journey," Jesus, "a man ran up and knelt before him and asked him, 'Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?' And Jesus said to him, 'Why do you call me good? No one is good except God alone. You know the commandments: do not murder, do not commit adultery, do not steal, do not bear false witness, do not defraud, honor your father and your mother.' And he said to him, 'Teacher, all these things I've kept from my youth.' And Jesus, looking at him, loved him and said to him, 'You lack one thing. Go, sell all that you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come follow me.'" Does that sound familiar, comparing it to the account? Now, we don't have these instructions being given, but we have the very activity involved in the life of Elisha that we see Jesus telling this guy who's of wealth to do whenever he calls him to follow him. But notice the difference in response. Verse 22. "Disheartened by the saying, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions." Now, we go back to our text for the day in 1 Kings 19, and you see Elijah being asked by Elisha, "Hey, I want to do this. There's no doubt about it, but please let me go home and kiss mom and dad goodbye first." And he says, "Well, that's fine. I haven't forced you to do anything." Or he might be saying, "That's fine. Just don't forget what you've been called to do. Follow through on the commitment that you've made." Verse 21, "So Elisha turned back from him and took a yoke of oxen, slaughtered them, boiled their flesh using the oxen's equipment, gave it to the people, and they ate. Then he arose, followed Elijah, and he became his servant." So before he leaves, he wants to go back. Now, we don't find out until verse 21, the fullness here. It seems anyway, why does he want to go back? We know that he's asked, "I want to kiss mom and dad goodbye," but also what does he want to do? Okay. Okay. He puts on a meal, and no, you're fine. He puts on a meal for whom? Okay, everyone. And what do you think might be entailed in his actions here? What can you read into this? That he kills a team of oxen, a yoke of oxen, and he cuts up all of the devices that held them together, and he used in plowing, and he makes a fire with that to cook the meal. What does that tell you? What's he doing here? There you go. He's saying, I'm done. My old life is finished. Don't forget, he had a good life. He was wealthy. He was very blessed. Everything was going well. And he says, I'm done with all of it. In part, he wants to go back to repudiate his former life. Not because there was anything wrong with his former life, but he's just been called to a higher task than what he once had. And so he says, for me, all the secular stuff is done. For me, it's the religious stuff. And just that for the rest of my days, number one. Number two, everything he had and your life was going well for him. He was wealthy. He gets rid of all of it. And part of what he does in getting rid of all of it, he helps other people. He gives it all away. He gives part of it in the burning of it to God, and the other part he gives to help others. Now, do you remember the instruction of Jesus to the wealthy young ruler? Well, I say that. He's never called young. But the wealthy ruler, whenever he calls him to follow him, he says, yeah, doing a lot of good things, but to follow me, you personally, there's one thing that's left. What you need to do is get rid of everything you have and give it away to the poor. And then you can come follow me. I'm sorry, I can't do that. Elisha, no problem. You have it, Lord. This belongs to you. Everyone else, you take it. I don't need it anymore. And he moves on. So I think that could be a little bit of a difference between the two as you go back to the 9th chapter of Luke when we read earlier. Why does Jesus give a rebuke to the guy who says, well, let me first go home and say goodbye to everybody there? Jesus probably knows the heart of that individual. And maybe he knows that when he goes home then and he sees the life that he has, that perhaps he won't follow through on the commitment that's been made. And that could be a difference between the two. He sees the fulfillment of who he calls the wealthy ruler to be. I want to go home, but in going home, I want to cut all ties that I have when I say goodbye, and whatever I do have, I just want to use to help others. And so I see that as a potential difference between the two of them. So that closes out what I was wanting to do in chapter 19, and that allows us to move into, and this is the point at which I don't have the slide that I wanted, and especially two maps, but we do have a map I can use, and I can show you some things for it that will help us to limp through the day. So chapter 20 and verse 1, here's where we pick up. Elijah now has his understudy. We're going to shift our attention from the well-known prophet to some anonymous prophets. Verse 1, now Ben-Hadad, in chapter 20, the king of Syria, gathered all his forces together. 32 kings were with him, with horses and chariots. And he went up and besieged Samaria and made war against it. I want to toss in a couple of pieces of chronology here. We haven't been talking dates for a while. So King Ahab reigns for, and I know it's been a long time, I won't hold you to this, but do any overachievers recall how many years Ahab reigns in Israel? It's a pretty good expanse of time, not enormous, but pretty good. Good. Look at you, Justin. All over it today, man. Double deuce is what it is. Yeah, it's 22 years that he reigns in Israel. And so the years of this are 874 to 853 BC. 874 to 853 BC. We're making good progress, aren't we? Just continuing to count down that timeline. The exact time period of which we're reading today appears to be 15 years roughly into Ahab's reign, meaning there will be about 7 years that are left over. This is taking place, what we're reading today in chapter 20, in 860 BC. 860 BC. That's where we stand right now. Getting somewhat late in Ahab's reign. All right, so we read that Ben-Hadad, who's the king of Syria, and that's going to be up to the north and a little bit to the east. Syria is, or a little bit off our screen, upper right here. He gathers all his forces together, but he's not alone. 32 kings with him. I know that sounds super impressive, and it's certainly more than the one. But I will state that it appears that these 32 kings appear to be heads of these tiny allied principalities, almost more like city-states than real like nations and empires. Nevertheless, there are 32 peoples, in addition to the one being led by Ben-Hadad, who are in agreement, and they come down together against Samaria and besiege that city. Samaria is right about in the center of Israel, maybe not perfectly in the northern kingdom, but certainly in the entire Promised Land area. And let's not forget that Samaria is serving as what at this juncture? And then I'll go to Roy. What's the significance of Samaria at this time? That's the capital. That's the capital of Israel, the northern kingdom. Okay, Roy? Yeah, let me see. English. Well, and it's one of the... Go ahead, I'm sorry. That's it. That's what it is. And of course, it frustrates me, Roy, because I have the topographical map that I purposely put on here because I wanted to talk about elevation in this. It makes a difference. And it would help. So Samaria is in the hills. That's what it is. And even though they're traveling south and a little bit southwest to get to Samaria, after they've gone down some, they have to go up. Because also Syria has some high places in it, a number that are higher than Israel. But they go down from their high places in elevation, and once they get to Samaria then, they have to ascend again. And yeah, good question. So that's what it is. It's about elevation. Okay, good. Yeah, that's a good point, Justin. I hadn't thought about that, but metaphorically it could make some sense too, as in to come against, to rise up. Yeah, good point. So he comes up, whether metaphorically, literally, both fit, and he besieges Samaria. Well, they have a lot of experience in this. They surround the city and they make sure no one can leave or come in, and they make war against it. Then he sent messengers into the city to Ahab, king of Israel, and said to him, "Thus says Ben-Hadad, your silver and your gold are mine. Your loveliest wives and children are mine." This is a good guy. He seems pretty reasonable, don't you think? Sit down over dinner and have a conversation. Okay. Basically, he says, hey, you're done, is more or less what he tells him. Israel has some history with this guy. Turn back to chapter 15. This isn't the first time that Ben-Hadad's been encountered, and there have been some issues in both of God's peoples. So 1 Kings chapter 15, and let's look at verses 16 through 20. And there was war between Asa and Baasha, the predecessor, of course, or one of them, of Ahab. Then you have Nadab who comes after, but there's Nadab, there's Baasha. All right, so there's war between Asa and Baasha, king of Israel, all their days. Baasha, king of Israel, went up against Judah and built Ramah, that he might permit no one to go out or come in to Asa, king of Judah. So this is besiegement also. Then Asa took all the silver and the gold that were left in the treasures of the house of the Lord, and the treasures of the king's house, and gave them into the hands of his servants. And King Asa, who's king over Judah, sends them to Ben-Hadad, the son of Tabra, the son of Hazion, king of Syria, who lived in Damascus, saying, "Let there be a covenant between me and you, as there was between my dad and your dad. Behold, I am sending you a present of silver and gold. But here's what I need you to do in return. Go break your covenant with Baasha, king of Israel, that he may withdraw from me." So here's what's going on. Baasha, who's the king of Israel, has this alliance in place with Ben-Hadad, who's the king of Syria. And they've aligned to attack the southern kingdom, or at least hurt them anyway, in Judah. And Asa, who's king of Judah, says, well, this isn't working out. I need a little bit of relief here. But the key in all of this, the linchpin, is Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria. And I know what kind of character he has, the type of man he is. He's not really about loyalty. He's about the highest bidder. And so he gathers together everything that he has monetarily, and he sends it up to Ben-Hadad, and he says, look, all this is yours. The only thing I need you to do is to break your covenant or your word with the people to the north and join my side. I need some help here. Ben-Hadad's like, How much you got there? Okay. So that's when we find in verse 20 of 1 Kings 15. Verse 20, Ben-Hadad listened to King Asa and sent the commanders of his armies against the cities of Israel and conquered Ijon, Dan, Abel-Beth-Maacah, and all Kinnereth. That's the area around of course, the Sea of Galilee or Sea of Kinnereth in the Old Testament, with all the land of Naphtali. And so this guy was a problem for Judah to start with in the past, for a different king. He then became a problem to Israel for a different king. And now we find him under the reign of another king of Israel, and guess what? He's a problem. He's continuing to attack Israel. So he says, your silver and your gold, those are mine. Your loveliest wives and your children are mine. Basically, I'm going to take your life personally from you, O king. This is the threat that's been made against him. Verse 4 of 1 Kings 20. And the king of Israel answered and said, my Lord, or you're my master. O king, I'm not the king, you're the king. Just as you say, I and all that I have are yours. This Ahab character seems to be a little bit of a coward. He won't stand up in his own house and be a leader in his family. He won't stand up in his nation and be a leader. Now he won't even stand up for himself when he has the opportunity. Oh, sure, just take everything. Can you imagine? Take all my money. I don't mind. You want all my wives? Here you go. You can have them. You want my kids? Sure. Just don't hurt me. Whatever you do. Doesn't seem to be much of a person. Verse 5. Then the messengers came back and said, thus says or speaks Ben-Hadad, saying, indeed, I have sent to you, saying, you shall deliver to me your silver and your gold, your wives, and your children. But I will send my servants to you tomorrow about this time. And they shall search your house and the houses of your servants, and it shall be that whatever is pleasant in your eyes, they will put it in their hands and take it. You ever read that book, If You Give a Mouse a Cookie? Oh, those pesky mice. They want a glass of milk. And if they get a glass of milk, they want they eat everything that you have in your home. Well, that's the way this is. This guy says, okay, here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me all your money, you're going to give me your prettiest women, and you're going to give me all your kids. Oh, yes, you're my Lord and you're my king. Here you go, take it all. Just don't hurt me, whatever you do. And then he sends a messenger back. I don't know that he expected it to be so easy. Oh, he recognized this guy's just a pushover. I'm going to take everything then. He won't even put up a fight. And so he says, I tell you what, we're also going to go through all of your villages and everything that we find that's desirable, we're going to take every bit of it with us. And now he knows he might have a problem on his hands because it involves other people in the land. Verse 7, so the king of Israel called all the elders of the land and said, notice, please, and see how this man seeks trouble. For he sent to me for my wives, my children, my silver, and my gold, and I did not deny him. And all the elders and all the people said to him, do not listen or consent. Truly, Ahab is a pushover. And in one sense, you give him some credit because he's seeking feedback from the people leading. And I guess that's kind of good. But do you really need people's advice to say, no, don't give away everything we have and all of our people and make us slaves? You see, his failure seems to be in strength, courage, just leadership in general. Number 9, therefore he sent to the messengers of Ben-Hadad, tell my lord the king, still being very respectful to this tyrant, all that you sent for your servant to do the first time, that's okay, I'll do that. But this thing is where I draw the line. I will not, I cannot do that. And the messengers departed and brought back word to him. Then the all-reasonable Ben-Hadad sent to him and said, the gods do so to me and more also, if enough dust is left of Samaria for a handful of each of the people who follow me. In other words, we're going to come in, we're going to pillage this place, and there will be nothing left, not even the dust of the land is going to remain. So the king of Israel answered and said, "Tell him in response, let not the one who puts on his armor boast, like the one who takes it off." Ooh, well, what does he mean by that? That's pretty deep, isn't it, for maybe Ahab anyway? What does he mean? Let not the one who puts on his armor boast, like the one who takes it off. Okay, good. I like it, Marcy. So she said maybe it's one who acts like he's fighting the battles, but he's really not the one doing it. Anything else? Again, I'd like to read, this is capturing the sentiment from the contemporary English version. Ahab then answered, "Ben-Hadad, don't brag before the fighting even begins. Wait and see if you live through it." That's pretty good, isn't it? All right, let me also read from the Message. It's similar to that. The king of Israel countered, "Think about it. It's easier to start a fight than end one." What he's saying is, it's better to be the one who takes off the armor than the one who puts it on. In other words, it's better to be the one who comes out of the battle alive than the one who went into it bragging. And there's a time to talk about who won, but it's not as the battle's beginning or before it even starts. It's at the end of it. In other words, he's saying, let's fight this battle. Let's see who's truly victorious in the end. I don't know. I'm starting to warm up to this Ahab character. Maybe he has a little bit of fight in him after all. So verse 12 of 1 Kings 20. Verse 12. "And it happened when Ben-Hadad heard this message, as he and the kings were drinking at the command post," great guy, "that he said to his servants, 'Get ready.' And they got ready to attack the city. Suddenly a prophet approached Ahab, king of Israel, saying, 'Thus says the Lord, have you seen all this great multitude?'" And remember, it's not just Syria, but going back to verse 1, it's 32 other kings and their soldiers that have aligned with them. I mean, it's a joke. Israel's about to be slaughtered. They're not even going to be able to put up a fight. But there's this prophet of God who approaches Ahab and says, "Hey, the Lord has noticed," and he asks Ahab, "Have you seen all this great multitude? Behold, I will deliver it into your hand today, and you shall know that I am the Lord." And we know the type of person that Ahab is and the statements that are made. He did more evil in Israel than any king who was before him, and he's been this tremendous thorn in the Lord's side. Why do you think God's being so kind to Ahab here? He sends a prophet to him, and these people are about to just slaughter not only Israel, but probably as well kill Ahab and take the people into captivity. And then God sends this prophet, and he says, "Hey, you see all these people? You're going to win this battle today. I'm going to strengthen you to do it." Why would he do this for Ahab, do you think? Paul? Okay. And how many does he say, just a couple chapters back, are still in Israel who follow him truly? How many of those? And you don't have to. Is anyone? 7,000. So there are a lot of people that are still faithful to God. And so good, Paul. It may be more about the good of the remnant of his people than it is the corrupt leader of them is one thing. But a second thing is this. I know Ahab's had his hiccups along the way, to say the least, but he's shown some positive signs here recently. He doesn't try to stop Elijah when there's the execution of all the false prophets, which the Lord ordered to be done 500 years prior. You have 450 prophets of Baal, 400 of Asherah, the female counterpart. And he doesn't seem to fight any of this. But it's whenever he goes home, not home, but goes home to his sweetie in Jezreel, that she's the one who's hot about all of this, and she kind of runs things in the kingdom, if you haven't noticed that. He doesn't have a lot of encouragement at home. Now, that's not to let him off the hook. He should be a leader in his home. He should be a leader among his people. That's a great weakness of his. But my point is this. He has recently shown some positive signs toward God. And the whole point of that showing up to the northwest on Mount Carmel from heaven is so that everyone would know that the Lord or Yahweh is God. And notice what the Lord says here. "Have you seen this great multitude? I will deliver it into your hand today, and you shall know that I am the Lord," or when transliterated, Yahweh, the same message that was taught up on Mount Carmel. Verse 14. "So Ahab said, by whom? I'm going to deliver, and you're going to win this victory. Who? Who do we have to fight these battles and to win this for us? And he said, thus says the Lord, by the young leaders of the provinces. If you're a king and you needed people to go fight a battle, to go lead in battle, you're probably not going to choose the barely oversized boys, the young men, to go. These don't have any experience, undoubtedly. And so he says, I'm going to have the inexperienced, those who have no clue what they're doing. They're the ones who are going to go. Well, why would God pick these guys to go win this impossible battle, do you think? You recall the account with Gideon and the tens of thousands of forces he has to attack the enemy. The Midianites are like grasshoppers and like or like the sand that's on the seashore, massive in multitude. And God says, you have too many. You have too many. You have too many. You have to, and eventually he ends up at 300. There you go. That's what you need to win this battle. Doesn't make any sense. Why is he going to choose the guys who don't have any experience, that have no clue what they're doing? Why would he pick them? He wants it not to make any military and any physical sense, so that God gets the honor. He's trying to prove this point among his people yet again. I am the Lord. Trust in me, and things will be okay, even as they stand today. We can still reform this land. Then Ahab said, who will set the battle in order? What he means by this is who's going to be commander of the armed forces, maybe even who's going to lead the people in battle. Has he forgotten who he is? And what his title is? He is the king. He's the leader of Israel. When the kings were originally chosen, the people said, we want someone to lead us, to go out before us and to fight our battles. And God says to this coward, hey, I'm going to give you the victory. You don't need to worry about anything. It doesn't even matter who goes out there and fight. Who's going to be the leader of this operation? That's why you've been chosen king. And he answered, you're the one who's supposed to be doing this. Well, credit him. He listens to God. He does what he says. Then he mustered the young leaders of the provinces, and there were 232. And after them he mustered all the people among all the children of Israel. You remember some of the numbers we've encountered in the past of many hundreds of thousands, and counting them up, and 500,000, close to 1 million of warriors. So Israel gets everyone that could possibly fight for her, and she has 7,000. That's disappointing, isn't it? So we see just how far through the years and their unfaithfulness to God, the mighty have fallen. And Paul, to go back and just into the number we brought out, this may be the faithful largely that are left in Israel, 7,000 of whom even earlier we read. Undoubtedly, it's many of them anyway. Verse 16, so they went out at noon. That doesn't sound like a lot of fun, does it? And here's why I would suggest that. You know where Israel is and how arid and how toasty it gets. And you have a lot of work that you need to get done outside, and so you get everything together and you get out, you're ready to start working at noon. That's hot. That's miserable. Well, I think this may be strategic. This is the time of day when most people don't want to be out working, especially in desert-like environments. This is when you want to be taking a break. And certainly right now, that's what Ben-Hadad and his troops are doing. At noontime, they're taking a break. So they went out at noon in verse 16. Meanwhile, Ben-Hadad and the 32 kings helping him were getting drunk at the command post. These guys are idiots. They're intoxicated, and they're supposed to be out fighting battles, getting ready to fight battles. They're out of their minds. They don't even know what they're doing right now. But I think some of this serves to the arrogance also. They have such numbers and military prowess that they can hold over the Israelites. They think there's no way they can possibly lose. The young leaders of the provinces went out first, and Ben-Hadad sent out a patrol, and they told him, saying, O king, men are coming out of Samaria, like they want to engage us. Remember, they've been besieging this place for a while. So he said, if they have come out for peace, take them alive. Don't harm them. We'll listen to them. Maybe they want to surrender. And if they have come out for war, take them alive. Well, this guy who doesn't seem to care much about people, just human life in general, that seems pretty compassionate. I think probably what he has in mind here is we'll capture them and probably we'll torture them. We're going to teach them a lesson. Okay, we're not going to let them die easy. It could be what it is that he's thinking. But again, the arrogance. They can't do anything to us. They're 232 young men. We have, who knows, maybe 100,000 here. What are they going to do to us? Just go capture them and bring them in regardless of what they want. Verse 19, then these young leaders of the provinces went out of the city with the army which followed them. Maybe they didn't foresee this. Oh, wait a minute. They're more than what we thought. There's 7,000 following behind them. And each one, that is of the Israelites, killed his man, mano a mano. Syrians didn't expect this. They fled, and Israel pursued them. By the way, probably part of the reason they're in such disarray is because of the lack of their leadership that they have. These guys are intoxicated. They think, well, we don't even need any leadership to be victorious in this battle. And they have a rout that's put on them. And Israel pursued them. And Ben-Hadad, the king of Syria, escaped on a horse with the cavalry. He probably didn't even have time to climb into his chariot, just trying to escape with his life. Really scary episode for him. Then the king of Israel went out and attacked the horses and chariots and killed the Syrians with a great slaughter. And the prophet came to the king of Israel and said to him, go strengthen yourself, take note, and see what you should do. For in the spring of the year, the king of Syria will rise up against you. Probably what he's telling him is this. You know, it's been a good day and you've won the battle, but the war is just beginning. And I'd like for you to pause right here. Turn, if you will, to 2 Samuel chapter 11, and we'll close on this today. 2 Samuel 11. This is a common practice back in this time as far as war goes. And we're a little bit familiar with this because of the account of David, and then what comes about with Bathsheba. But what precedes this, that sinful activity, verse 1 of 2 Samuel 11, in the spring of the year, we're told, the time when kings go out to battle, David sent Joab and his servants with him and all Israel, and they ravaged the Ammonites, besieged Rabbah. But David remained at Jerusalem. It was a recipe for disaster, but I read it for the first part of the verse. It's in the spring of the year, the time when kings go out to battle. Very common. Now, why do you think that would be the case? Why is spring the time to go put a whooping on people, or try anyway? You enjoy being out and doing things in winter? You're like, okay, good. Yeah, and it could be that you have 3 really good seasons ahead of you that you know you can be involved in this conflict that's taking place. So it's very common in the spring, probably for longevity and weather purposes, to be able to get involved in these conflicts. So this battle's taking place. Israel's won, but Ahab's informed. It's great. Don't get too high on yourself right now, though, because you've got a war that's coming. When wars come about, it's in the spring of the year, and it's something that you're going to have to contend with. So you need to plan in the off season, over winter time, for this. That's coming from the man of God. We'll end right there. Let's pick up next week and cover the remainder of chapter 20. And we'll just keep our memory verse where we are, and that's in number 42. But any other thoughts through this little battle, the skirmish that takes place between the Syrians and the Israelites? Okay, we'll pick up there then. Thank you.